Tonight, on Night Friday Stories, you're about to hear two real accounts, one shaped by trauma, pain, and a breaking point that couldn't be undone, and another defined by a moment of courage so intense, it almost doesn't feel real. These aren't just stories. They're pieces of reality, where fear, pain, and courage collide. Turn down the lights, adjust your volume, and get ready, because some stories don't leave you when they're over. On January 8, 2005, a man named Martin checked his mailbox and found something unusual waiting for him. It was a package with no clear sender. Curious, he brought it inside and opened it. Inside, there was only one item, a videotape. No label, no note, nothing to explain what it contained. Puzzled, Martin decided to watch it. What he saw was deeply disturbing. The tape, which ran for nearly an hour, showed a man calmly speaking about violent acts he intended to carry out. He described, in unsettling detail, how he planned to approach his targets and the crude tools he had prepared.
I'm not trained in torture methods, which is what I'm gonna have to make do. I got my drill here. The reason why it's got this padding on it is just to try to silence it a bit because I'm in an apartment. I got gags, socks, got lots of duct tape. I got a soldering iron, sheets. It's rather crude implements. I think can work wonders, especially if it's used in the right way.
But as shocking as the content was, that wasn't what affected Martin the most. He recognized the man in the video. It was his friend, Ricky Rodriguez. This wasn't just a random recording or a stranger's manifesto. It was a personal message, something Ricky had deliberately sent to people close to him. A final explanation. Ricky's life story began decades earlier. He was born on January 25, 1975, to Karen Zerby, a member of a controversial religious group known as the Children of God. The group used spiritual language to attract followers, often young and impressionable, but operated under deeply troubling beliefs behind the scenes. When Ricky was still very young, he was taken in by the group's leader, David Berg, who treated him as a symbolic figure within the organization. On the surface, Ricky appeared to hold a special status. In reality, his childhood was marked by severe abuse, acts that were not only allowed but encouraged within the group's inner circle. As he grew older, Ricky began to question what he had been taught. He slowly realized the extent of the manipulation and control surrounding him. In 1999, after spending nearly his entire life inside the group, he finally escaped. Alongside his girlfriend, Alexia Manuel, he managed to leave by pretending to travel within the organization, then fleeing to the United States instead. Adjusting to life outside was anything but easy. Still, Ricky tried to rebuild. He found work as an electrician, got married, and eventually settled in Tucson, Arizona. But no matter how far he went, his past followed him. The group he had escaped from was still active. Ricky knew that others were still trapped in the same environment he had endured. Over time, the weight of that knowledge became too much. In early 2005, he made a decision. Before taking action, he recorded a long video, speaking openly about his thoughts, his pain, and his intentions. He sent copies to a small circle of people he trusted, wanting them to understand what he was about to do and why.
I am making this video, well, for many reasons, I guess. I suppose the main reason is that I want there to be some record of the way I feel, my ideas, just who I was, really.
Part of his plan involved confronting someone from his past, a woman who had played a role in his abuse. He invited her to his apartment under normal pretenses. What happened next is only partially known, but the encounter ended with her death. Afterward, Ricky drove to California and checked into a motel. At some point, he called his wife, telling her what had happened and hinting at what he had planned next.
I can imagine how I would feel, how liberating it would be.
But despite everything he had prepared, he couldn't continue. The following morning, authorities found him in his car. He had taken his own life. For those close to him, the loss was devastating, though perhaps not entirely unexpected. Ricky had believed that confronting those responsible would bring him some form of relief. But in the end, it didn't. The video he left behind became his final statement, a glimpse into the mind of someone shaped by trauma, searching for justice, and ultimately unable to find peace. Meanwhile, the group he once belonged to continues to exist to this day, and now led by his own mother. The first story leaves behind a difficult question. What happens when someone carries pain for far too long? But not every story ends in collapse. Sometimes, in the middle of chaos, someone chooses to act. And that's what makes the next story so different. And just as powerful. Because while one mind was consumed by the past, another made a split-second decision. That changed everything. This is what real courage looks like. The kind that doesn't feel possible until it happens. I want to talk about someone I genuinely call a hero, and I mean that in the real sense of the word. Not the kind of hero people throw around online as a joke or meme. I'm talking about true, selfless bravery, someone who risked their life and likely saved many others in the process. This is the kind of story that doesn't always get the attention it deserves, but it absolutely should, because moments like this are rare. On April 7th, 2026 in Oklahoma, a high school principal named Kirk Moore did something extraordinary. He confronted and tackled an armed shooter inside his school and was shot while doing it. Surveillance footage captured the moment. A 60-year-old principal charging straight at a 20-year-old former student who had entered the school with 2 loaded semi-automatic handguns. Without hesitation, Moore stepped in to protect his students. From what's been reported, Moore heard a disturbance, went to investigate, saw the gunman, and immediately acted. He rushed him, tackled him onto a bench, and managed to pin him down long enough to stop him from continuing the attack. During that struggle, Moore was shot, but he kept going until the weapon was no longer a threat. And that decision, to act instantly, may have saved countless lives. The shooter had reportedly been inspired by past school shootings and intended to carry out a large-scale attack. He ordered students to the ground and attempted to fire at least once, but his weapon malfunctioned. After fixing it, he aimed again, but that's when Moore intervened. According to investigators, the attacker claimed he specifically targeted Moore, but his plans went far beyond that. He admitted he intended to kill students, faculty, the principal, and ultimately himself. Moore, who has spent more than 3 decades working in education, put himself directly in harm's way. At one point, the gunman fired and hit Moore in the leg. Even then, Moore kept fighting, forcing the attacker down, controlling his arm, and preventing further shots. Another staff member eventually rushed in to help and kicked the weapon away. When you watch the footage, it's honestly incredible. The gun was pointed right at Moore's head at one point. The fact that the shot hit his leg instead likely made the difference between life and death. But even facing that kind of danger, he didn't back down. That kind of courage is hard to even comprehend. He made a split-second decision to risk everything, not knowing how it would end, just to protect the people around him. The suspect is now facing multiple charges, including intent to kill, and is scheduled to appear in court soon. Meanwhile, Moore was hospitalized but is recovering well. And the appreciation from the community has been overwhelming. In a really touching moment, he even attended the school prom shortly after, and the students honored him by naming him prom king. It was their way of saying thank you for what he did for them. At the end of the day, this is what real heroism looks like. No hesitation, no concern for personal safety, just a commitment to protecting others at any cost. Stories like this deserve to be told and remembered. 2 stories, 2 completely different paths, one shaped by wounds that never truly healed, the other by a moment of courage that stopped something far worse. And maybe that's what makes it all so unsettling, knowing that in extreme situations, there's no single outcome. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next Friday. Peace.